My mom, when I left, was really, really upset and just cried when I divorced Tony, my ex, and she just was like, I will never like get behind you on this. I was just really upset about the whole thing.
Welcome to Voices of Deconversion. We share the inspirational stories of deconversion told by former Christians who are now atheist or agnostic. Our stories remind us we're in it together. They encourage us as we discover who we are and help us to embrace who we become. Now here's Steve with today's guest.
Welcome back for episode 19. This is part 2 of my conversation with Sarah Brennan. At the end of part 1, Sarah had just divorced her husband, who she'd lived with for 10 years. She was leaving behind everything she knew. We pick up Sarah's story as she's rebuilding her life and rebuilding the community of friends around her. She discusses her mom's reaction to the divorce, and later in the episode, she tells an amazing story of going before a panel of pastors arguing in favor of living an openly gay lifestyle. Thanks for tuning in for part 2.
You know, I lost most of the friends that I had in the church, so I didn't have the community that I had once had, so I kind of had to rebuild that, and I did that a lot, like with like my gym classes. I kind of built this community of people that I hung out with, like from like gym classes that I had, and we made a lot of friends out in Salt Lake through Carly's work and then through my work too, and so it was kind of just this whole rebuilding of my life, and so I think it was hard.
Yeah. Well, what was the most helpful thing during this time?
I think just the way everything, like how we were able to be like just friends through it all, like my ex and I, and just the people that did stick around in my life, the people that I was able to still be friends with, and all the support that I had. My mom, when I left, was really, really upset, and just like cried when I divorced Tony, my ex, and she just was like, I will never like get behind you on this, and was just really upset about the whole thing. And it's funny now, like she still is very Christian, and she still thinks like what I'm doing is wrong, but she like loves Carly, so it's really funny. She loves Carly more than she ever loved Tony. Like she's always like hugging her and like messing around with her and stuff like that, and so it's just really funny. It's like she can't like accept it because of like her beliefs, but she can't help like the love that she feels for Carly.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this funny thing.
That is a funny dynamic. Like deep down, you know, like if the religion wasn't in the way, the relationship would be perfectly fine in that sense.
Yeah, and it is. We just don't talk about it. Like we don't talk about it, but I mean, like my mom came over today, and I'm not gonna like hide who I am. So it's
Right.
like I came home for lunch to see her, and I gave Carly a kiss when I walked in the door. My mom just kind of, I think she just pretends like we're like best friends or something. I don't know what she does in her mind to like reconcile it, but
That's
I mean,
funny.
she always gives Carly a hug, and she like kisses her on the cheek, and she's just like, she just really likes her. Like she likes her like probably as much as she likes me, you know? So it's kind of funny.
Well, that's really good. And that's really, I mean, like this whole thing it's nice to hear that there was so much, you know, nothing's perfect, but there was a lot of support. Yeah. Eventually your mom kind of came to a point where she was, you know, able to, I guess, embrace Carly and embrace your relationship, even though she says she doesn't agree with it, you know?
Yeah, she hasn't gotten to the point where she calls her like her daughter-in-law at this point, but you can tell like she just, like she cares about her a lot. So yeah. It's just funny. But yeah, it was really, really hard when my mom came down so hard, and I had to threaten to like not let her see the kids because she was like teaching them things about me that I didn't want her to. And so that was hardest things. And she loves the kids, like they're like her whole life. And so she was crying and like, how could you keep them from me? And it was very dramatic, the whole thing. And but yeah, finally she ended up coming around. We had moved back here, and she invited us for Thanksgiving, and Tony ended up coming too. And she was like praying around the Thanksgiving table, and she like basically thanked God for everybody but Carly, and still
Oh,
called Tony like her son-in-law. And so Carly was really upset and was crying, and my mom, like, I think that's when things turned for her. Like, she just saw like how upset Carly was. Like, she was crying, and my mom just like started crying too and just felt awful. And like from that point on, they've had this like great relationship. So I think she just realized, like, even though she doesn't believe it, like, just to see like how much pain like she could cause somebody with her beliefs, she realized that wasn't right.
I think sometimes Christians don't understand how hurtful they can be, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about a situation in my own life where, someone close to me said something, and it was really hurtful to me, and I don't think they had any clue that it would be hurtful. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think they were even thinking that, and
Yeah.
I wonder, if your mom in that moment, she was just kind of thinking what she was thinking. She wasn't considering necessarily how
Yeah.
Carly would receive it or how you would receive it or how it would come across. And so
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like, Carly's response, was maybe an eye opener for your mom.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was, because my mom was just horrified. She was like, I wasn't even thinking. That's exactly what she said. She was like, I don't know. I was just praying. Like, I didn't even realize I did that. Like, she was just kind of just horrified, like the look
Yeah.
on her face. And my mom can be kind of oblivious sometimes too. And so, yeah, I think, yeah, that was just a huge eye opener for her. And ever since then, like, the relationship, like, she stays the night with us, and she's seen us like laying in bed watching TV, and she just like, she doesn't make her comments or anything like that. She just accepts it. And I don't know, I'm
Yeah.
sure she tells herself something to make herself feel better about it,
Well,
but
it's definitely a tightrope. I mean, you know this better than than I would, but it's such a tightrope to try to, for your mom in this case, to stay true to her convictions, but also stay
hmm.
true to her family. You know,
Right.
to
Yeah.
balance that love and affection she has and the loyalty she has to her kids, with no, this is the doctrine that I believe in, and I'm, staying true to God. It's like this balancing act
Yeah.
that they have to try to, and I know that must be really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. But it seems like everything's kind of worked out now.
that's great. Yeah, that's really good. That's really awesome to hear.
Yeah.
So, do Christians, the Christians, it sounds like a lot of the Christians you knew aren't in your life anymore, but if there are any Christians in your life, do they ever misunderstand the reason that you aren't Christian?
They think it's, most of them think it's for sex. Like, I left the church for sex. And I try to explain it to them that, yes, like, sex is part of it, obviously, but it's part of just being able to be who I am, like, about just being true to myself. And, with the Christian religion, it's hard because it's like, you're not you don't give in to your sinful desires, you don't give in to your flesh, you live for God, you don't live for yourself. And so for them to try to understand, like, it's basically like I'm living for myself now, and that sounds just so awful to them. Like, I've given myself over to sin, I've given myself over to my flesh, and I'm living for myself now, and I'm not living for anybody else. And so it's really, they just can't like understand it.
Yeah, to them it sounds like you're giving in to depravity and the sinful nature,
Hmm.
and you're being
Yeah.
selfish because you're thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
But it's actually a really, really healthy thing to do to
Right.
identify who you should be as a person and to pursue those things that bring you happiness,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's hard. I don't really have anybody. There was a friend of mine that, gosh, I had been friends with since I was 14 years old. And I believed it, like, when I met him when we were 14 years old, that he's gay. And he is like my biggest like hater. Like when I left, he just like tore me apart. and
Wow.
and it's sad. Like, I like, even to this day, like, I miss him. Like, I miss, like, we'd always spent St. Patrick's Day together. And it's funny because he will drink until he's just like out of his mind, and that's okay. But but being gay is not okay. And it's like, it's all like sins of the Bible. But yeah, he was probably the toughest one. that I lost out of all of it, because I really loved him and I still love him, and I ended up unfriending him from Facebook, and that's what kind of destroyed everything, because him and my wife got into it on Facebook over it, and my wife's a very strong woman. Like she's definitely not like a pacifist by any means, and so she can kind of stand her own, and they just got into it, and I kind of had to make a choice, and I told them, like, you can't like speak to my wife that way, and I ended up having to unfriend him, which I felt really bad about, but it was almost like I had to choose between him and her in that moment, and I had to choose her because she's my wife, but yeah, it was really hard.
But you said that he was gay, or he had told you he was gay?
I believe in my heart that he is gay. He's never said anything about it, but just I just think that he is just the relationships he's talked about that he's had with men, and just the way he is, the conversations we've had, I've always thought that.
Yeah, maybe it's like that. He's like repressing that part of himself, and so maybe it comes out in anger.
Those are really like my biggest haters. People that are closeted are the ones that give me the most grief about what I'm doing.
Wow.
There's like a lot of anger.
And like you had mentioned in this case, it often seems to go hand in hand, that the angry, self-righteous, maybe I'm not trying to call him self-righteous, but I just mean like that angry, self-righteous attitude often comes with like a load of problems. Like it sounds like, in his case, he can drink quite a bit, and doesn't seem to have a problem with that. But then here you're, the thing that in your life that he thinks is a sin, that's the big problem to him. Yeah, it often seems to go hand in hand, that they've got some kind of other issue that they're really struggling with too, but they're not going to focus on that. You become the focus, or some other sin, or some other problem, or some other thing.
Like that's like what he would truly want would to be, to like be with a man, but like he's not going to, because, of his beliefs. And so seeing me do it, it just like angers them, like this idea of like, don't you think that I want to do that too, but it's wrong, type thing. So it's just, I think, I don't know. And I was the same way, like when I was very, repressed, I would do that too. I'd like see, people together and be like, oh, that's just, I can't believe they're doing that or whatever. But inside, like I was so jealous, like that's all I wanted, but I was angry. And you would, say bad things about them, and how they're wrong and they're living in sin.
Right. And if you're the most angry, then that kind of gets people off your case in a way, people are going to, they think, well, of course, Sarah's not gay. She is very vocal about how it's wrong,
Exactly.
So, through this whole process, it really sounds like, things clearly worked out really well for the most part for you.
Yeah.
Thinking about your former evangelical life and being a Christian, part of you was sad, but part of you, it was easy to leave it. Was there anything you missed about being a Christian, or was there anything that you were really hanging on to that was hard to say goodbye to?
I think it was just mostly like what I said before, the community, and just kind of that quick fix, to, like I had an answer for everything. I loved having an answer to everything. I loved like not being afraid of death, not being afraid of anything, because having this assured like feeling that like I know where I'm going to go when I die, where even now, like if I think too deeply about it, it kind of scares me. Like I don't know what's going to happen when I die, and there's more things that are, like scary.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what's going to happen. Like nothing's sure in life anymore, and so there's a little bit of, I don't know, fear in that, I guess.
Sure.
Where before, there was no fear at all with anything.
So you went through not only one deconversion, but sort of a total transformation in a way, at least on the outside. You went from someone who looked like a straight Christian girl to someone who's gay and who is agnostic now. So those are two huge transitions and changes in your life. when you think back on your early years all the way until today, what about you stayed the same?
I think my personality is pretty much still the same. I'm kind of goofy and have I like to laugh about things, and I've always been pretty like athletic and sporty. I think really like for the most part, everything's pretty much the same. I'm just living with a woman now instead of a man, and I think I still am very positive. I've always been kind of a optimist about things, and so I think even without the church, I still have those sentiments. So I just put it in other things, but I don't really think that. I don't know. I think that we are who we are when we're born, and so I don't really see like a lot of things about who I am as a person have really changed, except I just get to be authentic about it now.
Yeah,
where I couldn't before.
That's a great way to put it. You're more authentic now.
Yeah.
And this is a stupid question. Do you feel less stress about it?
I mean, definitely about that. I think there's like other stresses now that come along with it, but yeah, definitely like I feel a lot better about that, and I feel less stressed overall just because of I can just be who I am.
When you reflect back on the Christian you, what do you think about that person now?
I just think it's funny, like just the things that I believed, the things that I would say to people. Like my wife and I kind of laugh about it because I'm like, oh man, if you would have known me before, you would have been like horrified, just the beliefs that I had, and things like that. And we've been like evangelized before, like when we were out together, and she like has no clue because she's never been exposed to any of that, and I'll have to tell her like, you're being evangelized right now, and she's like, what?
Wait, they tricked me.
Yeah, so it's just funny. And I would tell her, I used to be just like that, and she's just like, what? I can't even imagine you doing that. And like, yeah, I did. I would like walk down the streets and hand people tracts and try to convert them, and she's just like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't know you then.
That's so funny. Yeah, it's a complete 180. I mean,
yeah. But it's like the same personality now. I try to talk people into going to the gym with me. So, it's like the same like kind of personality, just in a different outlet.
Right. You said you're passionate about everything in life. So like,
yeah.
Now it's, I need a gym buddy, or, I want to play video games with someone. You're going to come play with me,
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, same personality, just a different venue, I guess.
This is out of sequence or whatever with the questioning, but I had I wanted to hear a little bit more about your biblical, your Bible school stuff. So,
okay.
How were you like in your early 20s when you were going to Bible school, like normal college age, or?
Yeah. I went right after high school.
And did you end up graduating from that school?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did, and I got my pastor's license and everything.
Wow.
And I practiced as a pastor for a while too. Like I married two friends of mine, and I was really into it. I was like part of a youth group and like was helping with that and running that whole thing.
Yeah. So after you got your pastor's license and you were were you like the head pastor of a church, or were you just like
No, I did like the youth group stuff.
Okay. So you were like the youth leader.
Yeah.
And you did that for how many years?
I only did it for it was only a year, because after that I went to like the reformist like theology, and so I stopped all that, and that was hard because I was not used to being kind of like subservient to men.
Oh.
I kind of went against all my feminist beliefs.
Yeah. But so you considered yourself a feminist then?
A little bit, yeah. My mom was very much a feminist growing up. Like she would always talk about how she hated men, and like she would wear this shirt that said, the more I know men, the more I love my dog. Like we grew up kind of in that like mindset that was very much like women power. And I did like boxing and Chinese Kempo and like all these types of martial arts, like growing up, just trying to be this tough kind of badass woman. And so, yeah, like being like pastor of the church and preaching and doing stuff like that was like very appealing to me.
And so that was fine, because in the evangelical church there is a little bit of freedom for women to do some leadership like that.
They could do everything. They can like they could start a church if they wanted to. They can pastor. If there were like a couple of churches where it was like a female pastor and she wasn't married or anything, it was her that was like running the church. So yeah, that was totally okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, like going away from that was really hard too. Like,
why did you change churches?
Because I had started believing in the Reformed theology and felt like I had like biblical proof that what I was practicing before was wrong, and I wasn't gonna like practice something that was a lie. And so I went to this like extreme, theology, and I didn't like it. Like I remember arguing with the pastors about it, but it was more just for them to like, prove me wrong. Like I just want to make sure that this is
I really
right
don't,
or whatever.
I really don't want to believe this. Can you please give me some proof?
Yeah,
so I don't have
don't
to believe
like
it anymore.
I don't like it, but if it's true, then I'll follow it, type thing.
Did you discover Reformed theology on your own, and then, or did someone kind of present it to you like, hey, this is my perspective?
My dad presented it to me, and then I met this guy out in California when he was living there, and he was really into it, and so we'd have like these hours and hour long conversations about theology.
Okay.
Like one time we stayed up like the whole night talking about it, and I just believed everything he said made sense. And so I just couldn't like go back to my old way of thinking after we spoke about everything that he was saying.
And this was like mid-20s, because this is before you came out.
Yeah, I was like 22. Yeah. And
okay,
like even now I think that like if people are going to take the Bible like literally, like you almost have to like believe in that way, because it's just very, I don't know, like if you're going to take it literally, then that's how you have to look at it. So
right, the reformed viewpoint is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so then what eventually, so then as you stayed in the Reformed church for how long then?
Gosh, like probably 10 years.
Okay, yeah, that was a long time. And you got married when you...
Actually, no, it was less than 10 years. Yeah, so it was shorter than. It was maybe like 8 years then. Because I married him when I was 23.
Okay.
And then we went to the Reformed church when I was like 24.
Yeah, so that was a big part of your marriage was going to that church.
Yeah, it was.
Wow, that is quite a journey, and the theology, the change in, what are some things that when you were in the Reformed church that you noticed? You said that you had to be more submissive as a woman. What were some things that changed for you when you went to the Reformed church?
I couldn't be a leader in any sort of like capacity. Like I could be like in the women's leadership, but I could never speak to like the full congregation. And so that was hard. I remember I ran like the soundboard, but I couldn't be like the head person in the soundboard because I was a woman. And so that just like really bothered me.
Yeah.
And I was really good at it, like, because I am musical and I could play good guitar and do things like that. And so it was like, I have a good ear for that sort of thing. And so that was frustrating to me. And just the way that like, in my marriage, like we never kind of followed the traditional church ways, but it just bothered me just seeing how some of these marriages were run. It was like the woman did like everything and the man basically just went to work and that's it. And
Wow.
He wouldn't do anything around the household. Like he didn't like help with the children really that much. And like the woman had to do all the cooking and cleaning and, like it was just frustrating to me.
Of course, I would think it would be. As you kind of realized as you embraced being gay near the end of your time at the Reformed church, did you just like slowly stop going to church, or was it just one day just stopped going, or?
Oh, no. With the Reformed church, you sign a contract basically saying that if you decide to leave, that they will come after you and bring you back to the flock. So it's like really intense. Like it's this full like contract thing. So I had to go like before the like pastors, like the panel of pastors, and explain to them like why I couldn't be like a part of the church anymore. And I took them through like scripture by scripture on how I believe that it's okay for me to live a homosexual lifestyle. And so I argued with them like through the scriptures about like all the different, there's like 7 passages, I think, in the Bible that talk about homosexuality. And so I went through all 7 and gave them my like interpretation of it. And we argued about it and went through it. And I basically told them like, I'm happy to stay at this church and continue like what I'm doing and everything, as long as I can live this way that I want to live. And they said, we cannot allow you to like be a part of this, be a member at this church if you're going to live that way. And so they basically like kicked me out of the church. So that was my way to get out without them chasing me.
Wow. That sounds creepy that you have to sign a contract and they'll come get you.
It's totally creepy.
It's like drag you back in or something.
Yeah, it's pretty
crazy.
But yeah, my ex-husband came with me and just sat there with me the whole time.
Wow.
And they asked him, they're like, do you want to divorce her? And he's like, no, but I'm not going to like refuse it if this is what she wants. And so he kind of supported me in that, even though he didn't believe anything that I believed. He like sat there and was like, I don't want a divorce, but I'm going to go through with it because I'm not going to force her to stay married to me. And so they told me, they're like, well, he's the one being abandoned, so we're going to be on his side. And I'm like, that's great. Like he could use all the support he can get, and that's fine. And like, but this is my stance. This is what I believe. I've given you scriptural evidence of it. If you don't want to like believe what I believe, then that's fine. Then we need to go our separate ways. And that was basically my way to get like released from like their grip. I had a friend that left like before me, a really good friend of mine that I'm still friends with, and she just fled. Like she just left, and they were like trying to find her and coming to her door and stuff. And I told her like, you can't do it that way. Like you can't just like leave. I remember she was hiding at my house one time, and they came to the door, and I'm just like, it's like the worst situation ever. But I've always been really honest through the whole thing. Like I just believe that it's the best way to do things, like just in every area in life. I just try to be as transparent and honest as possible, and I feel like that's worked for me.
Yeah.
And I've been able to have things happen less painfully, I think, because of it.
You must have been doing your homework, like in the years preceding that day when you had to basically defend those scriptures, because your background was that those, you'd been taught your whole life probably that, homosexuality was a sin. So that's all you had heard. So at some point you must have started to look into it yourself then. Yeah,
I did. I looked at it for a while, and yeah, there were some things like that I brought up that they could not like explain away. And I said, so you're just going to leave it at that? Like you don't know, but you're just going to choose to believe this way, even though you don't have proof for it. And they were just it was hard for them. They've always had kind of a hard time with me because I questioned everything about them, and they can't always explain everything,
right.
perfectly. And so I remember one of them telling me that, like, they were like, I wish that in the Bible it said homosexuality was okay because it would make life so much easier. And I'm like, well, it kind of does because of, these explanations that I'm giving you. And they just couldn't. They're like, I'm sorry, I just can't buy it. And I'm like, it's because you were taught this your whole life, but you can't think outside of that, and they just couldn't like think beyond what they had been taught.
I think it's really cool that you got the chance to basically make your case.
Yeah.
In a way. I mean, I'm sure that was a whole, ordeal that you could have done without, but that's kind of neat too that you got a chance to defend yourself.
No, I was happy I did. It gave me a lot of closure just because I felt like I did everything I could to stay in the church and to but still be who I am. And, ultimately it was them just not accepting it. And so it was easier for me, like, that I didn't have to, like, run away or do anything. It was like, this is who I am. This is what I believe. If you don't want it, then you don't have to have it.
So did they enforce it right away? Like, so after did they like meet and vote or something?
No, they told me right away. They were like, you're welcome to still attend our church and hear the gospel. But you're not a member. Your membership has been revoked. You can't serve in any sort of like serving capacity. Like you can't be on the worship team anymore. You can't be in women's leadership. You can come as like a non-Christian basically and hear the gospel. And I was like, no, thank you.
So did you ever go back?
No,
So that was it. You walked out the doors, and
I was done.
and
Yeah.
then did you ever go to any other church after that?
I went to one, I think it was like an Episcopal church or something like that, and they were more into like community service and community outreach and that kind of stuff. And I was like, I'd rather just go to like a non-religious like community outreach if I'm going to be a part of something like this. So I went there once, and I thought their theology was just kind of like watered down and just kind of this excuse to like basically get money and do like community outreach. And I feel like you can do that without religion. So I don't know. I wasn't really, that was like the only one I went to. And then after that, I was just done.
So you had come up with these, you had read and understood the liberal perspective of those passages in the Bible that talk about homosexuality. So you could have just taken that perspective and stayed a liberal Christian. So what was the thing that really made you go, you know what, I'm agnostic. This isn't for me?
Because everything else didn't make sense. Like even taking homosexuality out of it when I started, because once you start looking into one thing, you just see everything. And so when I started looking into like just every part of it, it just didn't make sense. And the biggest thing was just that like this wasn't an original story. And I think I just really thought that this was like this, I don't know, like this original like truth, I guess. And when I started like looking into just like, you know, stories that had happened way before the Bible had even been created. And I remember looking, like when I was really into Christianity, I remember looking into like Mormonism and all the different religions that looked like Christianity and being like, oh, these are cults and this is why. And then I just realized like, gosh, this is just like another cult. I mean, not that like it's a cult, but this is just like another like thing that, you know, was created by man, you know.
Yeah.
And this has already been created before. Like with Mormonism, I was always so down on that because it's like, it's only been around for what, like 50 years? This is so ridiculous. Like who would believe this? But then it's like, but there was stuff before Christianity that was around way before that. And so it was like, it just didn't make sense. It's like, this is just all stuff made up by men. And then if you look at it, it's very like centered towards men and you know, and it makes sense because of the culture back then, you know, when it was written. It's like, this is clearly written by men. And there's, I don't know, I could talk for hours about it, just about just like the different aspects that just don't make sense, like the different personalities with God, you know, like God the wrathful, you know, sending everybody to hell, you know, like killing people on the spot in the Old Testament, to the loving, you know, Father. It's like, how do you like reconcile these two beings? And I remember being mad, like reading some of the Bible, like, God, this God is terrible. Like, what a horrible like thing to like revere, you know. But then do we just ignore the Old Testament and just focus on this loving God? But he is both the wrathful God and the loving God, and they just couldn't reconcile like that together. And then just with the combination of him hating homosexuality and all this stuff, it was just like too much for me. And it's like, this just doesn't make sense. And then, you know, the miracles and all that kind of stuff, like I just everything, the parting of the Red Sea and the Virgin Mary and just everything, if you just think about it like scientifically, logically, this is just like, doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it just piles up, like you were saying, you know.
Yeah, it just was one thing after another, and I was just like, I just don't believe this.
Yeah. Well, what's the best thing about being an agnostic?
Being able to be free to think what I want to think, to be able to look into things and research things on my own and not have to like follow some sort of protocol. I mean, it's just very freeing. I guess that's the best way I could describe it. It's just a newfound freedom. I feel like the church, they try to tell you like, oh, there's this freedom in Christ, but it's not freedom. It's almost like a slavery. So it's like when I got out of that, I experienced true freedom.
Yeah, that's great. What is one thing that you learned or experienced that you may not have if you were still a Christian?
Like being in a lesbian relationship.
I figured that was going to be the answer, but I thought I'd ask anyway. Yeah, that's kind of a big one, right?
Yeah.
When you think back on your deconversion experience, what are you most proud of?
Just being able to stand up for who I am and being able to be honest with everybody, even like the difficult people, and still being able to thrive and be okay and be a good mom, and, just through all the controversy that it caused.
Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't discussed that you want to share?
I don't think so.
Well, as you know, started this podcast for the recently deconverted Christian. Is there a piece of guidance or encouragement that you could offer that person?
I don't know. I guess I would just say that a lot of times, like, your instincts and what you feel, like, the Christian church teaches that your heart is the root of all evil, and it's like where evil desires come from. And I think that that's just a lie. I think that a lot of times the things that we feel in our heart, the things that we, like, our instincts can be pretty right on. And just, like, sometimes we do have to follow our heart, and sometimes we do have to be true to ourselves, and it doesn't mean that it's wrong. You live and you learn, and I think by repressing yourself, it just makes it worse. It just makes everything, it just can be very unhealthy. It's like a person who, like, starves themselves and then has to eat everything in sight instead of just eating well, like eating a healthy diet. It's like that. You repress yourself so long and then you just go crazy and do things maybe you wouldn't normally do.
Are there one or two resources that you can think of for someone who is deconverting, maybe someone who is also gay and going through that on top of religious deconversion?
This is more specifically probably for, like, a lesbian person, but there's this book called Dear John, I Love Jane, and it's like a compilation of, like, all these different women who, like, realized they were gay, and it's all their stories in there, and that was really helpful to me. I really enjoyed reading that and just hearing about the hardship of these women and how they persevered in their stories, and it was just really encouraging to me.
That's really cool. That's a great resource.
Yeah. And then that podcast, but I can't remember the name of it right now. I could ask Kristen, though, and we could shoot it over to you.
Yeah, just shoot me an email if you're able to find out what that is, and I'll add it to the show notes along with this Dear John, I Love Jane book, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They could Skype me or email. It's fine too.
You said Skype or email?
Yeah.
And I'll include your Skype address then, and
okay.
an email. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and just include your contact information in the show notes. And Sarah, it has been really wonderful meeting you and hearing your story. It really is amazing. I mean, all the different things that you went through. So thank you very much for taking the time to share it with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Voices of Deconversion. Be sure to join us next time by subscribing to the podcast. If you'd like to learn more, check out our newsletter at vodpodcast.com.